Good morning. How you doing? I almost just started talking before that music ended, and it would have been a travesty if I had done. No, I'm just kidding. My name's Tim. I'm the lead minister here at Markle Church of Christ, and I have the honor and privilege to yet again bring the message this morning and to kickstart our new series called Noel, the King is Born. And as Nick said this morning, we are going to venture into the Gospel of Luke for our Christmas story, although on our Christmas Eve service, I'm going to go into Matthew just to switch it up for fun. And then on Christmas, going to Luke again, because, you got to add some flair to it or whatever. But, I don't know. I like saying nice things about people when they deserve it, and oftentimes they do deserve it, actually. So, but man, the singing and the music this morning was fantastic. I just loved hearing their voices and your voices, and it was just awesome. So, I also want to say, a team of us. I played a very, very small role in this, but a team of us, elders, deacons, and staff. And some volunteer support made the building and what you've seen here look all Christmassy. And Samantha Oakleaf, our children's minister, she led the charge in all this. So, I just want to say it looks awesome here. And all the way into the kids area, it just looks awesome. And then I know that there's a sign out there if you walk in that says coffee next week. It was supposed to be today, but we had a little bit of an electrical snafu this morning. But Jason Frisch designed that stuff and led a team in putting that all together, and it looks fantastic. So I'm just telling you, if you see any of these folks, go pat them on the back and tell them that they did a wonderful job, because, the truth is that sometimes stepping up and doing a really good thing can still be scary, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know if it's going to turn out the right way. Sometimes electrical snafus happen, but it's still worth it to do the good and right thing. And we got people around here all the time that do it, and I just like to mention it. So we have awesome people here. You all are awesome. Angie and I love being here, so I'm just saying it. So. And in the spirit of stepping into good things and not knowing how they're going to turn out, I wanted to open up this morning by getting our minds around that concept. Have any of you ever taken the leap into something that you didn't know how it was going to turn out? You knew it was the right thing to do, but you stepped in with trepidation? Anybody in here? Hands raised, raise them up in the air like you just don't care. No, I'm just kidding. I have to admit to you that coming here was that for me throughout the entire process. And I wanted to open up by sharing that, partly because this whole week I've been meeting with different people, and for whatever reason, I've been asked my story of what brought you here or whatever. And I don't know if I've really formally shared kind of the backdrop. But one of my lead mentors, Tom, when I finally told him that I've answered yes to the call here, we were in the parking lot leaving lunch at a place called Workhouse Pizza. It has really good Chicago-style deep dish pizza at it, which is why we met there frequently, once a month. And we were in the parking lot. It was the last time I was going to meet with him before moving. And he gave me a hug, and he goes, "I'm so glad that you made this decision. I'm going to miss doing this face-to-face, but you are going to the right place." And then he said, "It's about time, because I've been telling you to do this for 10 years. And the funny thing is that I listened to him 10 years ago. I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be somewhere else. But the point is that this wasn't a decision that came to me last April, last February, last January, last December, last November. I'm trailing back to when the process started. No, it actually has been in the making for a long while. But the thing is about me, I've always been a very, very tentative person. Even I can remember, it's funny, I think I told you a little while back that we did swimming lessons with Leo. And the funny thing about Leo is his favorite thing about the swim lesson, I'm going to set this big Bible down, I'll pick it up in a minute. The big thing about Leo is that his favorite part of the lesson was the part where he had to crawl out, elbow, knee, and then getting to jump back in. He could not wait to jump into our arms. Now, when I was a little kid, my mom, who I trust more than most, would try to get me acclimated to jumping into a pool, and she would hold her arms out like this to get me to jump in, and I simply wouldn't do it. Because all I can imagine was all the things going wrong, like I'm going to jump in, hit my head, sink to the bottom, and that's the end. That's right, at age 5, I thought about those things real good. It's hard for me to not think about all the things that could go wrong, could go awry. And so the truth is that the church that I was working at wasn't just the church I was working at. It was home to me. I came to faith in that church. I was brought up to be a leader in that church. I served as a deacon there before I came on staff. And then I was invited to come on staff and stayed there for 12 years. And if you're doing math in your head and you're thinking about what Tom told me, for a long while, he, along with other people in my life, were telling me, you need to be willing to step up or step out from beyond where you're at. And then this place came up. And here's a little admission to you. Markle Church came on my radar from a couple friends that were friends with Jason. And they were badgering me to put my resume in for 2 weeks before I ever sent my resume in. And the reason that it took me so long to send my resume in is because I had this prayerful moment followed by a very gut-turning reaction. That the moment that I turned my resume in, I knew I was going to end up here. And I didn't want to leave. In fact, we told 2 of our closest friends about this place before I ever sent my resume in. And as we were leaving their house, my friend Craig put his arm around me and he said, hey buddy, he's like, I love you. Don't go to Markle. And I told him, oh, I'm not going to Markle. Which, by the way, is the last thing you need to say to God's ears when he wants you to go to Markle. I knew. I don't know why I knew. I don't think I would probably was, I don't know where I was on like the ranking system and all that stuff. It wasn't like I was like, well, I'm awesome. Of course it's going to be. It wasn't that. I had this fear in my gut that if I took that step, it's going to mess with my life in a way that I haven't been ready for it to be messed with for a while, if ever. And yet here we are. You're stuck with me. I would say I'm stuck with you, but we've loved the experience so far, so I think we won the end of this whole sort of thing so far. The reason I tell you that is when we look at the Gospel of Luke, the first 2 chapters tell of the birth narrative of Jesus. Jesus is going to come into the world. And we celebrate, we get to December, maybe even the day after Thanksgiving. If you're a really zealous Christmas type person, once November hits, you've got lights on the house. My friend Craig I just told you about that put his arm around me, their family, they put up Christmas lights throughout their house and on their house so early on. And they're so Christmas oriented that they move their bed to their living room and sleep under their Christmas tree. Okay. Anybody that zealous about Christmas in here? No? Nobody? Well, if they listen to this, sorry, you guys are the weirdos. Anyway, no, they're awesome. But here's the thing. We celebrate this season and we think about the lights, casting out the dark cold and the frigid temperatures and bringing warmth. And the message of Jesus coming into the world definitely brings warmth to a cold and broken world that so desperately needs the King. But the thing, though, is I hope that as we look at the story of the birth of Jesus this month, that we'll embrace a different kind of good. Because sometimes really good things are very scary to step into because they mess with our stuff. And the Christmas story, the way Luke tells it, brings that idea into full focus very quickly. Not starting off with Jesus being born, not starting off with Mary, his mother, being told that Jesus is going to come into the world. Not starting off with the birth of Jesus' cousin, John, but starting in the temple with John's dad, Zechariah, being told the wonderful news that not only something amazing is going to happen to him and his wife, Elizabeth, but they're going to play a small and yet no small part in the grand story of the coming of Jesus. And it's amazing the detail that Luke is going to give us surrounding Zechariah and his finding out about this message. And so that's where we're going to start this morning. In Luke chapter 1, right after Luke tells us why he's writing this story in the first 4 verses, he talks about how others that were aware of the eyewitnesses to Jesus had gone and they've written their own accounts, and he's decided, I'm into this sort of thing, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write my own account after having investigated it all. And once he gives us that little intro to his gospel, he starts us out at the temple with Zechariah. And so our passage today is going to come from Luke 1, chapter 5, chapter 5. I can't even talk today. Chapter 1, verses 5 through 25. And this is what it says in the New English translation. During the reign of Herod, king of Judea, there lived a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. And he had a wife named Elizabeth, who was a descendant of Aaron. They were both righteous in the sight of God, following all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blamelessly. But they did not have a child because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both very old. Now, while Zechariah was serving as priest before God, when his division was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the holy place of the Lord and burn incense. Now the whole crowd of people were praying outside at the hour of the incense offering. An angel of the Lord, standing on the right side of the altar of incense, appeared to him. And Zechariah, visibly shaken when he saw the angel, was seized with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son. You will name him John. Joy and gladness will come to you, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must never drink wine or strong drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before his birth. He will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. And he will go as a forerunner before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. to turn the hearts of the fathers back to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready for the Lord a people prepared for him. Zechariah said to the angel, "How can I be sure of this? For I'm an old man, and my wife is old as well." The angel answered him, "I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and I was sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. And now, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will be silent, unable to speak, until the day these things take place." Now the people were waiting for Zechariah, and they began to wonder why he was delayed in the holy place. When he came out, he was not able to speak to them. They realized that he had seen a vision in the holy place, because he was making signs to them and remained unable to speak. When his time of service was over, he went to his home. After some time, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months she kept herself in seclusion. She said, "This is what the Lord has done for me at the time when he has been gracious to me, to take away my disgrace among people." Now, this passage is really, really, really powerful on a lot of different fronts. So first of all, as Nick mentioned this morning, way back in the summer, we went from 1 Samuel onward. And we've talked about how the people of Israel lost their way in so many different ways. And it led them to destruction and exile. And yet God kept bringing them this message of hope at different points. But the fullness of that message of hope wouldn't come to fruition until it started with this story. And I can't think of a better location for this story to start, right? Because when we were in Ezra, what do we remember here? The people that were in exile were brought back, and they had no temple. They had no place to worship. It was open. The peoples were around them. It needed to be rebuilt. And if you had went on from Ezra into Nehemiah, you would see the story of the rebuilding of the temple. And if you know your history at all, you'll know that the temple will be rebuilt. And then Herod the Terrible, he's called Herod the Great, but he ain't a great guy. He ends up being, for all of his faults, and there are many, he ends up being a real architectural whiz. And he actually spruces up the temple. And it becomes this elaborate wonder in the world, along with other things that he had constructed. And so at the time of Jesus, at the time really before Jesus, and when Zechariah is here as a priest, a part of this division, it is a magnificent splendor to behold. It is a place at the center of the Jewish faith. And we are introduced to Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. And one of the first things that we learn about Zechariah is that he's from the priestly lineage of Abijah. And if you go back into 1 Chronicles, somewhere in the ballpark of chapter 24. Okay, I'm not going to ballpark it. It's in verse 10. Have a little bit of fun. You see Abijah listed in a list in chapter 24, number 8. And it's not like the college football ranking stuff. But he's listed 8 of 24 there. And basically what it is there's 24 divisions, and the division of Abijah is number 8. And the reason these divisions are there is because this order and this number, they're meant to be in order of service. Their divisions are going to come and they're going to serve and do their duty as priests in the temple. And so we've got this in 1 Chronicles 24. We've got this mentioned here. And then we come to this very day with Zechariah, and it's his division. It's up. This process is still going, and his division is up. But while they're going to serve maybe twice a year, it's not a guarantee that Zechariah himself is going to be the one chosen. So they have a choosing system. They cast lots to figure out who the lot's going to fall on, and it falls on Zechariah. This is his big shot. He gets to go in the holy place, lead the prayer, light the incense. The people outside, it says they're standing out there praying as he goes in. This is not only a big honor from a people of honor that he comes from, but he's getting this one-time shot to be the guy to go in. And he thinks he's just going to get to go do this routine that he's probably waited to do, and he finally gets to do it. And then this pesky angel shows up and ruins the whole thing. And I'm just kidding. It didn't ruin the whole. You know, sometimes in life you think you're just going through. You get to do this thing, you get this thing of honor, and you don't expect anything to deviate from that. It's deviation enough that the lot fell on you. It's your one time out of your divisions 2 times. That's like crazy enough. And then all of a sudden he's doing his thing, and then on the right-hand side of the altar there's an angel standing there with a message. Angel actually, by the way, just means messenger. But in this case, it's a divine messenger from God's divine counsel. I don't know what angels actually look like. They probably didn't look like little babies with wings on them. I get the impression, because every single time someone runs into an angel in the New Testament, they're like, whoa! Something wasn't quite right. They were like very frightened by this. So it says in the text that Zechariah is visibly shaken. Now, backing up just a bit more, we don't just learn about his priestly lineage. We also learn about his wife, Elizabeth. And she is a descendant of Aaron. And if you know your Old Testament, you'll know Aaron is the brother of Moses, and he's the start of the priestly service. Goes all the way back to him. This little couple here is Jewish royalty. And yet, despite their lineage, we find something else about them. Elizabeth is barren. Not only is she unable to conceive and have a child, but they're both in old age. They're past childbearing years. Now, if you read through the Old Testament, if you go back to Genesis 11, the moment you hear a woman's barren and they're of old age, alarm bells should be ringing in your brain that you're about to read some miraculous thing happening. God's going to do something. And the reason that should be going off like ding, 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 ding is because when someone's barren and of old age, they ain't going to have a kid unless God steps in. And the only reason that you tell the story that way is because God's about to step in. And so we've got this backdrop. Zechariah, priest, his division, his shot, cast by lot, turn it into a poem. And his wife Elizabeth, both of them old, she's barren, he's in the middle of the holy place, and an angel shows up. A scary angel with a message. And the message is, well, it starts out with, God has heard your prayer, and he's about to give you a big old yes. And by the way, if you're paying attention to Zechariah's story here, he's old and his wife is barren. How many times do you think he prayed that prayer? How many times do you think they prayed that prayer? How many years back did they pray that prayer? How many of their family members said, when are you going to have a kid? I've told you before, Angie and I, we didn't get pregnant until 35. We got married at 22. If you do the math, that's a 13-year gap. We heard, when are you going to have a kid, a lot. Especially from grandparents. Anyway. How many years do you think they heard that question? By the way, in that culture, a bit different from ours, you probably caught at the end of the story when Elizabeth is contemplating what's going on in her life. She's in seclusion after 5 months of pregnancy. And she says, what? God has taken her shame away. It wasn't just an annoying question that parents and friends and all the well-meaning people in your life ask you. There was a cultural stigma at play. You see, in this religious setting, in this way of life, it was oftentimes assumed that the faithful had things go right. Your needs are met. Your biology's working. Things are going to work out. And as we already pointed out, Zechariah and Elizabeth, they come from a strong, important line. They're strong, important people. This barren business shouldn't have been the way it was. She felt shame, probably because she experienced being shamed for the state that she was in. How many prayers? How many prayers per day? How many days? How many hours? How many years? Months? A lot. See, we read that point. The scary angel shows up, says, boo, and it says, by the way, after I've scared you, God heard your prayer. Oh, Zechariah, I probably would turn around after I was done being scared out of my wits. I'd have been like, oh yeah, which one? Which prayer? The last 50? But in God's good timing, here they are, at old age. Elizabeth barren. God has heard your prayer. And He's going to do something about it. Your wife's going to conceive, and you're going to have a son, and his name's going to be John. And then it gets better or more daunting depending on how you want to look at it, because right when the excitement of finally, this thing I've desired my whole life is going to happen, there's kind of oh, by the way, Johnny boy, that's what they probably called him, he's going to kind of be important. He's going to kind of be important. And how do we know this? Well, because the angel says, not only is his name significant, but who he's going to become will be significant. He's not supposed to have any wine or strong drink. And in fact, the Holy Spirit is going to dwell within him before he's even born. Now again, if we're modern readers, which we are, we're reading this story, that sounds wonderful. But as I hope to drive home, and I'm going to give away a little bit of where I'm going to go at the end of this, but if you're a parent, even if you're a parent of adult children, grandchildren, every day, you want your child, your grandchild to do well, right? And not just do well so it makes you feel good so you don't have to be embarrassed. No, I mean you care about that child, right? But imagine you've waited this long and suddenly you get this wonderful news and then you find out that this child is going to be so important that they've got to be set apart, different from everybody else. Oh, no sweat, but you got to be the parents of that kid. Have fun. This really good news has become really daunting news like that. And not only that, if you're considering their age and the life expectancy in that world, and it's your duty to raise up this kid that's got to be different and set apart, you might be wondering, am I even going to be around to make sure that happens? And that leads us to the fun for us, the not so fun for Zechariah part of the story. Oh, I forgot one thing before I go there. We're also told, this is a really important detail, so I can't forget it. We're also told that Zechariah and Elizabeth are faithful and righteous in whose sight? God's sight. Notice it's not that Zechariah is like, hey, I'm from a special division. We've got good family lineage. I'm awesome. No. This is God saying they're awesome. Okay, he didn't say it that way. He just said they're faithful. No big deal. When God says the person is faithful, that means they are faithful. He gets it right. He doesn't mess this up. With that caveat in place, this is where the fun begins. Because after hearing this message, this good news, this daunting news, this extraordinary news, Zechariah responds and says, come again? How's that going to happen now? Because I've been praying about this for a long time. He looked at his Apple Watch back in the day. I've been praying about this for a long time. I'm old, she's old, which doesn't he get in trouble for saying that? Anyway, we're old. We've been waiting for this for a while. How's this going to work? This is not how it works. But I think that it's not just the biological mechanics of it that have him stumbling. He's just been told that this child that they're going to have is going to need to stand out, be set apart, be different. He's going to have to be raised so much differently than everybody else. And he's contemplating, how is this all going to work out? And Gabriel, the angel that's there, he does get a little high and mighty. He's like, hello, I'm Gabriel. Didn't you know when he got scared? And I've got a message from God. And his reaction to Zechariah is basically this. You should have believed me, and since you didn't, you're not going to talk for a little while, which probably made Elizabeth kind of happy. You're not going to talk for a little while until all of this stuff comes to fruition. Now, I know I don't have a long time to read the rest of the story. I encourage you to read the rest of the Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John story, because we're going to get into the whole Jesus business after this. But to spoil it for you, to nobody's shock and dismay, what God put in motion comes to fruition. They conceive. Elizabeth gives birth to a boy. And when they come to name him, everyone's like, what are you going to name him? And they're like, you're going to name him after his dad? You're going to name him after grandpa? You're going to name him after the weird uncle over there? And Zechariah writes on a tablet, John. Which, by the way, that should also tell you how privileged Zechariah was that he could even write something down, because in that world, being able to read and write wasn't very common. So he writes it down, and he's like, look at this, which some of them might not have been able to read, who knows, but he's like, no, it's going to be, and they're like, but John doesn't make any sense because you don't have anybody in your family with that name. And then all of a sudden it says his tongue is loosened, and he says, his name's going to be John, okay? I'm dad here, y'all just get out of the room. That's how his tongue is loosened. Just like Gabriel said, you're not going to speak until it comes to fruition. And once it does, he speaks the boy's name into existence. Zechariah, there's a bunch of different ways you can read this story. You can read Zechariah as some priest that doesn't deserve to be in the moment and falters in the moment, and he's just fortunate that God has done a good thing. There's some truth to that, because he is human and God is God, and none of us are really deserving. But I liken the story to Zechariah experiencing something good that's going to shake everything up, which makes it really, really hard not only to fathom, but to step into. You know, I said that we had Leo at age 35. I've told you before, my wife is a type 1 diabetic. And as she was growing up and as things constantly changed in the medical community, one of the things that type 1 diabetics heard, and we had other friends back home that had this, that were older or whatever, it was common for a type 1 diabetic to be told, you might never be able to have a kid, and even if you can, you probably shouldn't, because it could be really, really dangerous. You can imagine how hard that is to step into that after hearing that. And then also hearing, like, when are you going to have a kid? And then on top of that, anybody in this room that's ever had a kid knows that there is this excitement and at the same time trepidation. You're excited that this wonderful thing that was missing in your life is now going to come into your life. And you're going to look at them and they're going to be all cute, and then one day they're going to be 3 and driving you up a wall. And then they turn 4 and they drive you up a wall, and from what I've heard, 8, and then 13, and then 20. And then according to my mom and dad, 38, and they're still driving you up a wall. Such a wonderful thing can bring so much fear and trepidation that you don't know if you're really ready to step into it. Oh, that doesn't mean you don't want to. It just means you don't know if you're ready. And for all you thrill seekers out there, maybe stepping into the trepidation's your sort of thing, and you just don't think and you just jump in. For others of us, it takes a while. It could take 10 years. That's how we should read this story. We should read it as someone that wants to step in, that's trying to do good, who according to God is faithful. But when their moment of answered prayer comes, they don't know if they can handle it. And it very briefly gets them in trouble with the angel Gabriel. But God makes it happen anyway. And the son that they have is going to be named John. And he's kind of like Elijah because he's going to be the forebearer to something greater. And the greater thing is going to be Jesus. He's going to be set apart. And he's going to be a crazy man out in the wilderness, like the Nazarites of old that didn't cut their hair and didn't drink anything and didn't do all this stuff that everybody else that was normal in that time did. But his whole purpose was to make the way ready for the Lord. And Zechariah and Elizabeth, in their old age, their humble state, their willingness to serve, their dedication to routine and rote service in the ways of God that God deems faithful, are going to be a small and yet not so small part of this wonderful big story. Now here's the catch. We can look at this story and say this is something good that causes trepidation, because it's going to mess with Zechariah and Elizabeth's life forever. And we can sit and we can think about all the things that we are tasked to step into that are good, but will mess with our lives forever. Whether it's a kid or a job or a friendship or a marriage. Name it. But here's one. The coming of Jesus isn't just lights and cocoa and warm and fuzzy and gift-giving. It is good. But oh man, it is going to mess with your life. Because it isn't just good news. The King is born. And kings control everything. Kids kind of control everything. It's funny that God sent his king as a baby in a low state. Because babies don't just mess with the parents and the family and the friends. But this particular one is going to mess with the whole world. That's why we celebrate good news, even if it's scary to embrace. Each week we take communion here as a church family to celebrate what God has done in sending Jesus into the world. And not only sending Jesus in the world, but sending Jesus so that he would die and rise again on the third day. And so I want us to just pause here for a few moments to reflect on the season, to reflect on the goodness of the story, and to reflect on how much this story can mess with our lives. Because over the span of this month, we're going to dig into not only the way that Jesus coming messed with the lives of the people that were right there, direct witnesses, but how it messes with everybody's in such a wonderful way. And that's what we celebrate when we take communion. That God has messed with our lives in a wonderful way. So please take a little bit of time to think about that, and then we'll take communion together. I invite you to take this bread and eat. This is his body, which is given for us. And I invite you to take and drink from this cup. This is his blood, which is poured out for us. Please join me in praying. Dear Lord God, I just thank you for this morning. I thank you for another wonderful Christmas season. And God, I pray first and foremost that as we begin over the course of this month to reflect on the wonderful good news story of your Son, Jesus, coming to the world, that it will truly be a light to our lives. Whether things are going splendidly right now, whether they are challenging for us right now. As so many of us face the good and the not so great day in and day out, whether things are going well or whether we're facing illness, loss, hardship. No matter where we find ourselves on the spectrum of the good to not so good of daily life, all of us need Jesus. And not just in a cliche, everybody needs Jesus sense, but because some of us need the shake up, and some of us need the warmth, and most of us, if we're honest, need both. So God, I pray that as we reflect on this good news this season, that you'll bring about both. That we'll be shaken into doing what you call us to do. And that we will be given light when it feels like darkness around us. And I pray, God, that we as a church family here can share in this story together, lift one another up in love and good deeds and in prayer, and just to help each one of us put one foot in front of the other and to live a life worthy of you by your Spirit. And we pray these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.